Please welcome Pastor Preston Clegg and Paul Raushenbush to Little Rock stage here at St. Waters Library System. Good evening.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. You're good tonight? It's not raining yet? Your souls are good? Bodies aren't tired? Come on, people. You're in for a treat tonight, so bring your whole self into the room. We're thrilled to have Paul Raushenbush, who is a gift to this country. He is a gift to the Christian faith. He's a gift to the Baptist tradition. One of the reasons Nate texted, I'm convinced, is he heard a Baptist minister talking about the dangers of Christian nationalism and censorship and religious liberty and said, I know two of those. Do y'all know each other? So, I'm thrilled to be associated with Paul. And I want to say this, too, before we dig in tonight. I want to thank Nate and the whole library system for this event. Is it my mic? I'm sorry. Not just for this event, but for all events like it. Down. Okay. Did y'all see how beautiful the library was when you walked in tonight? And it's not only the aesthetic beauty, but it's meaningful work that they do day in and day out. And of all the things that I'm proud of in the city of Little Rock, the work that our library system does is right at the top. And I hope that you recognize that as well. So thanks to Cal's and thanks to Nate. Paul, welcome to Little Rock.
I feel very welcome, so thank you very much. I have a lot of new friends already, and I'm really glad to be with you tonight. It is an honor. And let me just echo what you just said before we dig in about this library. And I have, I want to talk a lot about libraries tonight because I think it's out of my passion as a minister. But I just want to say this library and what I have already witnessed in the warmth and the professionalism and the kindness and the spirit of the welcome that I've experienced, it's good that Heather just walked in over there, and she has been so welcoming. And Nate, since we first met, this has been one of the visits I've been most excited about this whole year, is to come here to Little Rock to talk about libraries, to talk about the value of a public library in the life of our democracy. And I have been blown away. So thank you very much. And again, congratulations on this incredible space and incredible mission.
So you run the Interfaith Alliance, and one of your initiatives is Faith for Libraries. Can you talk about the Interfaith Alliance in general, but also more acutely that initiative of Faith for Libraries?
Right. So Interfaith Alliance is a national organization. We are located in Washington, D.C. We have 30 affiliates around the country and growing. And we are a religion and democracy organization. Our tagline is Achieving Democracy Together. And we've been doing that for 31 years, supporting the idea of healthy boundaries between religion and government, the idea that religion actually is a building block of our American democracy and has an important role to play, and that the diversity of religious traditions, and that we don't actually have an established religion that gets to tell the rest of us what religion is and what our spirituality is, and to dictate to the rest of us what we have to do and what we have to believe, is one of the best ideas that America came up with. We've done a lot of not good ideas, a lot of terrible ideas, horrific ideas. That one is a great one, and we have to lean into that. And so Interfaith Alliance, again, we work on the Hill, we work in the courts, and we work in local communities to ensure that religion is a positive force in society, and to push back against the claims of some that they get to dictate to the rest of us what religion should be and will be for the rest of us. No one in America has a privileged position around religion. We have to keep on reminding ourselves, especially in this moment when some would like to take that on. And so that is, I could talk this whole time about Interfaith Alliance, but I really, it was so important for me to have the opportunity to talk about Faith for Libraries, which is something that we just launched 2 weeks ago with the American Library Association, Unite Against Book Bans, and the Association of Rural Libraries, to talk about the role that religion must play in fighting back against censorship, and to show up for libraries and librarians. And I assumed the presidency of Interfaith Alliance about 3.5 years ago. When I came in, I knew that there was a deep connection between the two great First Amendment rights, freedom of expression and freedom of religion, that those two things were very much together. And even in my first interview, I talked about PEN America as a group that I wanted to work with because I felt like there was an opportunity there. When we started talking about censorship about 3 years ago, we just looked around and saw the incredible uptick of censorship happening around the country. And so, we began to put it together. There is a common theme throughout censorship, which is some people want to decide what stories matter and who gets to decide those stories. And we saw that as a worrying trend for American democracy. I did something on the Hill, a briefing to Congress about religious freedom and censorship, and a lot of the leads of the American Library Association actually were in the front row because they were like, oh, good, allies. And the more I started kind of hanging out with the cool librarians, which I don't think is a phrase that anybody's ever said, although we all should. The more I became actually pastorally invested in this. And I have been in rooms where librarians have broken down crying because of the way they've been attacked just for doing their job. And so it hit me on a couple different levels. It hit me on a level of democracy and America. It hit me on a level of freedom of religion and the right to read, and as a person of the book, to the right to read books that are the stories that will illuminate us. And then also just as the outrageous way that people have been attacking libraries and librarians. And it felt personal then because I became proximate to people who were experiencing this on a first-hand basis. And so we've been really thinking about what might be a way that we could help. And the American Library Association, that's a big group, very, but they were so warm and they were so appreciative of someone saying, oh, okay. And so we figured out Faith for Libraries, which doesn't mean that all libraries have to, be faithful. That's not it. It's about how faith from diverse religious traditions and beliefs can show up alongside librarians and libraries to say, these are in such important spaces and we want to be together with you. And so I'd love to talk more about the specifics of it, but that's kind of the evolution of how it happened. It's I became more and more proximate to it and realizing that this was a front line of our democracy. And we had to, as people of faith, show up in that front line.
I think one of the unique tenors that you bring to this conversation is the religious liberty component of censorship. I think oftentimes people, when they hear censorship in libraries, they think freedom of expression, and it is. But you bring a freedom of religion tenor to this. Why, for you, is censorship an issue of freedom of religion?
Well, I mean, once you start saying we're going to pick which books can be on the shelves, you can pick books that include religious texts. And so, in addition, like the the primary location of censorship tends to be books that center black characters or by black authors. Then LGBTQ authors and LGBTQ books that center LGBTQ folks. But then there's also books that center Jewish people, Muslim people. It's amazing to me that Anne Frank is being pulled off the shelves. And so this is all in a context of white Christian nationalism, which is not everywhere, but it's a phenomenon of people who are deciding what stories count. And so I feel like already, no matter, it is such a slippery slope. And for those of us who are people who are, for religious folks who are grounded in stories, this, religion is about stories that we share with one another and that create a framework for our world and a vision for what this world and worlds beyond worlds are. Once you start allowing for the idea of censorship, it is very, there is no reason why they can't take their stories away. And so that's why we frame this as a religious freedom issue, because we feel like we should have access to the stories that can be transformative. Stories that have already been written, but stories that are being written right now. The idea that, spirituality and the spiritual stories of the world did not stop sometime like, name your time, 700 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. Spiritual stories are being written today. And the idea that some people can take away those stories from our ability to access them and go in and take stories off the shelves feels like an affront to my ability to explore the religious and spiritual meanings of my life. And for me, books have been that path. And I'll just say, there was an introduction, a very kind introduction about some of my heritage and my background. Everyone in my family are book people. The library, both our own library, but then libraries, that was the highest, those were citadels for us, for my family. They have always been citadels. And so the idea that there's that people would try to dismantle these places of learning and these places of opportunity to expand our soul and to expand it. It is an affront to me as an American. It's an affront to me as a person of faith, and it's and it is, again, back to my pastoral hat. It's an affront to me to the idea that librarians who are trying to serve their community are being attacked in such ruthless ways. It's outrageous. So it feels on all cylinders. It feels like a religious issue, and that's what we're trying to do with Faith for Libraries, which is bring that to, and I hope you're all listening to this, bring that to the religious sensibility of what it means to be religious in America today. If you want, I'm not just over here whistling in my corner. The Episcopal Church has passed a resolution saying that censorship is a core question for them. And the way it got there was the group of Black Episcopalians brought this to the wider Episcopal body. The Episcopal body deliberated on it and incorporated it into their core principles about what it meant to be Episcopalian today. The United Church of Christ has recently done that. So this is we're gathering a movement in this moment, and it feels so important that we come together on this issue.
So I have a few more questions for Paul, but we want to have a Q&A with you as well. So be thinking about any questions that this conversation might be bringing to consciousness for you. How do you think we arrived at this strange, bizarre place where we almost have people of faith on this side and librarians on this side and animosity and antipathy in between those two? How did we get there?
Well, we didn't get there. That is a complete false dichotomy. And in fact, the idea that this is a very convenient way to kind of create oppositional polars. There is no reason to believe that your librarian is not a person of faith. And even if they weren't, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, it doesn't matter. No one has, I just want to make clear. I'm not like, everybody has to be a believer of some kind. That's not the way. I actually believe that atheists, humanists, secular, have every right to full participation, and we should be in allyship. But this oppositional idea that there's people of faith over here that are protecting our morality, and then over here are those nasty librarians, and it's actually a ploy. It's an outrageous ploy that is being wielded, and to create suspicion and to create animosity, and it is. The president of the American Library Association is in a small town in Iowa, a deeply devout person. And I had a conversation with them when we launched this, and I've had other conversations. We wrote an op-ed together. This is a person who wants religious people in the library and wants even conservative religious people in the library to feel fully a part of their community. This is a person who was raised in a conservative Christian household. Mm-hmm. And all across the country, you're going to find a diversity. Just as America is diverse religiously, librarians are diverse religiously. And so this idea that there is these are not oppositional. These are actually faith and libraries actually have very similar missions. Places where we can come together, places of learning, places of opportunity. Every library worthy of the name is a place where you can come and you can feel fed intellectually, and often, like many libraries are the only place where someone can get internet, the only place where someone can get access about how to do taxes or how to and often churches or synagogues and mosques, they can provide services. And so it's really important that we remember that your local librarian and your local library is actually a welcoming place for faith. And it doesn't mean that one faith, we're not talking about one faith, we're talking about for faith and diverse beliefs and opportunities, and just a case in point. Today we had a gathering, an interfaith gathering at the library, and had a conversation about important issues. The library opened its doors to faithful communities for us to have a really great conversation, and that is happening all across the country. So there are opportunities, and this is really what I'm hoping faithful people will take advantage of. Figure out a way to show up for your librarian, and I do want to talk about specifics, but show up and be a part of your library, because your library is there for you, and just as you should be there for your librarian.
Yeah. I have this working premise that when a lot of people say religious liberty, what they see in their brain is religious liberty for me.
Right.
And so they're saying religious liberty, but what they're meaning is religious privilege. Because religious liberty means I grant to you what I want for myself. Do you think that's playing into some of this chaos with libraries and censorship?
I do. I think that's it. Religious liberty for me, not for thee, is the biblical way to say it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it's worth saying that something like 3/4 of the censorship and books that are taken off the shelves this is not initiated locally. This is a concerted campaign that starts at the national level by activists who are putting that out there, and then it gets enacted locally. But this is a concerted effort by people who are invested in some stories being taken off the shelves.
Yeah.
And the majority, there are a huge percentage of those are on lists. These are the books we're going to ban. and you go out and do it. This is so the idea that this is organic, and that people are like, finding out for themselves and then going is actually, it comes down to something like 12%. And so when we talk about like what religious liberty means in this case is that someone and well-funded activist groups at the national level are saying these are the books that have to come off the shelves, and they have their own reasons for wanting that, which have nothing to do with local communities and nothing to do with like the families that live there and the people and and this is at both public libraries like this and school libraries. And so again, that goes back to your perfectly phrased way. It's like, what does it mean? Like, I get to decide. And I do think that that's, this is what's happening in libraries, what's happening in censorship has to be put into a wider framework of what's happening in education, where curriculum is being, dictated to, so that we lose entire stories about slavery or Jim Crow or things that really happened in America are inconvenient for some people to talk about, which also erases the incredible stories of resistance through Black leadership, and often those are faith stories, but those have to be erased, because to understand those stories, you'd have to understand what they were resisting to. And so here we are, where some people are deciding what stories matter. And I just think, as far as religious liberty goes, I would like stories from all different people, from all different backgrounds, and we come from different vantage points. And there are stories on shelves that make me uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's really important to acknowledge that I actually, this is, I wrote a piece back when I was doing journalism, and kind of an op-ed saying like, it was called My Temptation to Ban Books, confronting my temptation to ban books. Because we all have things that we don't like. We all have things that we think are uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, well, I would hate, I want to take off all the shelves misogynist books, or anything that is about, there's lots of things that I don't like. But again, like, once you go down that path, and actually this is something that Louis Brandeis, who you Nate would know as a lawyer, and just the importance of freedom of speech. And how important it is, because he said the best antidote to bad speech is more speech and better speech. And I just don't think that the way that the taking away of information, it never works. And so I think we have to make sure that we allow ourselves to be uncomfortable. And here's another thing, just to say in that context, is that nothing is happening willy-nilly in a library. There are policies, there are lots of thought is going into these things. So the opportunity here is to be in conversation with our libraries and librarians and have real conversations about this, rather than just say, the last time I was in Southwest Florida talking to we have an Interfaith Alliance of Southwest Florida, the front page was 400 books taken off shelves. That's incredible. And again, these are concerted efforts by some people.
And it seems to me like a lot of the censorship is an effort to avoid the truth of things, right? I once heard Archbishop Tutu talk about South Africa after apartheid, and he said, we formed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it's not the Reconciliation and Truth Commission. It's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Yeah. Because if you don't begin with the truth, you're never going to get to the reconciliation. Mm-hmm. And one of the major problems in this country, he diagnosed, was we rush to the reconciliation and avoid the truth altogether. So it feels to me like a lot of the censorship is an effort just to move on without moving forward. Would you say that? You're saying that?
I think that's beautifully put. It is, opportunities to actually experience both. Right now, I think there's just an effort to completely, there are these new curriculums which completely, bleep over slavery, for instance, and the horrors of that, and are basically patriotic manuals of indoctrination. So I think we're at risk for that kind of craziness, and then having reconciliation is a whole nother effort, which it takes real talk. But I do think I'm not sure young people are going to put up with this. I am really interested in how, because the internet is a big thing, and the idea that you're going to just take away information and you're going to teach people. I mean, there's going to be some people who are going to do this, but I really think we're going to find that our young people are going to be watching carefully what older people do in this moment around showing up for their rights and showing up for the ability of them to learn. And young people are very aware of what's happening and are not going to put up with it. So I think it's up to us to make sure that we do our part so that they can learn, so that we can move forward as a country.
Yeah. So we've talked about sort of the religious liberty part of this. Talk about the centrality of libraries in a participatory democracy.
Yeah.
What does a library mean in a democracy?
Well, I'm not an expert in libraries, actually, so I can't really, and probably not the best person to talk about it. I can just talk from a personal experience. My kids, we live on a block. I live in New York City, and we live on a block that our library was closed for 2.5 years because it was being renovated. Sound familiar? But the moment it opened, they were like, the library's open. And we went in there and they were just like, they went crazy. And they were like, how many can I take out? And the idea that information was there for them to follow their own inspiration about what they wanted to know and how they wanted to learn and their own interests. And I have a very nerdy political 10-year-old who just really wants to know about politics, and I'm terrified of his questions, which are like, I have a question, and then it's like about the Cold War and South Korea, and I'm just like, I don't know, but but the library knows, and so he can go and pursue his information, and that to me is about democracy. It's about us being able to move as individuals and be able to pursue the life, liberty, and the liberty and the pursuit of happiness, and really be able to understand what that is for ourselves. And libraries are foundational to that as far as learning, a repository of our wisdom. But also, again, they are often the only place where people can come together. In some rural communities, it's the library, and then you go to the Walmart. I mean, and that's real. There's not another space where everyone is welcome, where the doors are open. Mm-hmm. So often it is the place where democracy happens, where people can come together. And so they're incredibly important, not only for holding our wisdom and holding our stories and being a place where information can be accessed, but also places where people can come together and learn from one another. Mm-hmm. They hold gatherings, they hold meetings. They have, these are very important parts of our community, and often they are I think the people who are right now where there is an effort towards. We are in a backsliding moment in our democracy. And I think there is a concerted effort to underfund or defund libraries as an effort of taking away a lot of these places where we can be with one another and learn about one another. And so it provides that important element. And the best way for us to move forward is to be proximate to one another. To be isolated from one another is really, that is the greatest friend for autocracy. But to come together and learn from one another, libraries are like religious buildings in that way. They can perform what I would describe that sacred act of bringing people together to grow closer to one another, to love one another, to love their neighbor.
I think he just called you a pastor, Nate, is
Yeah.
what I heard in that.
That's exactly
so,
right.
There you go.
Well, that was actually a phrase, secular cathedrals was a phrase that the current American Library Association president came up with. It was just like, we wrote, in this op-ed we wrote together, we were saying like, in one place one kind of thing happens, but similar ideas are coming together. And so I like this idea, and honestly, if you go to many of these public libraries, including this one, they feel like that kind of elevation. And even at my small library, that is a very local library in Manhattan, it's a beacon for us, and that is I think important. And yeah. I want to make sure that I get a chance to talk about what we can actually do.
Yeah, so that was my last question.
Good.
So be ready for your questions. Have them ready. What are some tactile action items that we might leave this place with tonight?
Well, so Faith for Libraries is actually quite a modest, in its scope, and it's very almost obvious. We have something called Banned Book, a resource, a 2-page resource, Banned Books, Banned Beliefs, which is essentially to inspire and give language around why this is important. And its message and what we're hoping people will take away is very simple. If you're a faith leader or part of a congregation, get to know your library. Get to know your librarian. Show up for them and say, how's it going? I did this with our local library on our street. I left my card and I said, if I can ever be helpful, if there's ever a moment in the life of the library where you'd like a religious leader to show up alongside you, I'm here for you. We also have a pledge that we're holding a big meeting. American Library Association is turning 150 in 2026, and they are holding a 150th anniversary in Chicago. We're holding a pre-gathering in Chicago for anyone who wants to come and talk about religion and how religion and faith can show up for libraries. And it's really an opportunity for us, again, to make explicit these two fundamental First Amendment rights of freedom of religion and freedom of expression. So that is also coming up. The librarians, we asked them, like, what would you like us to do? And they said, one campaign that we have is just write a postcard to your local librarian. And something tactile that they actually can get. So on our page, if you just put in your search engine Faith for Libraries, you'll come to Interfaith Alliance, our Faith for Library page. And you can download these really nice little postcards, which you can send to your local librarian, and it means something for them to not feel alone. I think right now, and so any way that faith leaders can show up for librarians. And the other way is really to recognize that libraries often have community boards that you can run for and you can be a part of, so that you can be supportive in that way. And make sure that we show up as this is something that is really important, is that in community, whether it's the city council, the school board, whatever, they have public meetings, and if we show up as people of faith and say, actually, I'm showing up because I support my library, I support my librarian, it just means so much, because I think what happened. And what we're, unfortunately reaping what's the opposite of a benefit? The deprivation of is we have a very well coordinated effort to undermine libraries that's happened, and often using religion as the point of the shield, and I think the point of the spear. And I think that religion is in some ways the best antidote to that, to be the shield that protects libraries and celebrates libraries. So I think it's really about recognizing that for democracy to really thrive into the future, this is an important effort for people of faith. And the last thing I'll mention again is the pastoral element for people who are faithful leaders to recognize that you may not know it, but your librarian may be under attack in very vicious ways, and they may need pastoral care. And the only reason I know that is because I've been proximate with librarians who have shared their pain with me. And I want to just underline that, is that there are places in America where librarians have been doxxed and attacked to such a degree that they've had to leave their community and leave the state. And I think that's outrageous, and it's often done by religious people. And that to me is a rallying cry to why religious people need to show up to be a force of love and inclusion and welcoming in our local communities.
Great word. So we want to hear your questions. We have 2 mics in the room. 2 requests. This is not a time for sermons. How about that for coming from a preacher? And secondly, questions end with a question mark. I once heard a moderator say. So share the room with your people tonight and ask good questions. But the floor.
And I can talk about other things besides libraries, but I'm obviously impassioned about libraries right now, and I'm in a library, so.
If you don't come, we're going to talk about Baptists.
Oh, yes.
So welcome.
Baptists, the history of Baptists in America is so interesting.
Yeah.
Going on that, what kind of Baptist are you anyway?
What kind of Baptist am I? My tradition is, I was ordained into the American Baptist tradition, which is, one of those splinter things, but more, it was, part of the Northern Baptist tradition that then evolved into American Baptist, and that is, when I was in seminary, I started, working in a Baptist church that eventually wanted to ordain me.
Thank you.
So.
That was an irrelevant question, but I appreciate your answering. Really agree with your insight that what libraries are very much having to do with religion, even the basic idea of the word in the Old Testament, that Moses gave us 10 words, and the Gospel of John talks endlessly about the word. And coming through the long history of Christianity particularly, it's been an effort to get the word out and make it more accessible to the public. And so the Vulgate and so forth, and I'll stop the sermon at this point and get to my question is, what you have not, I think, told us very clearly about is the opposition, I think, has a different viewpoint. They have one of Isabella and Ferdinand, and later in his life, Martin Luther, who wanted to impose, for the sake of their errant Jewish people and those who would not accept the theology that they were teaching. And we see that very much, I think, that's what I'm seeing, in the people who want to ban books. It's for the protection of the children and people who are not maybe as strong as they are, the adults. And we even see it getting, and I have a public health background, we see it in the imposition of reproductive clinics that are funded by the state to prevent women from having abortions. And they are funded by the state with few regulations to tell them fibs about the reproductive life. How do you interact, dialogue with people who want to change you or others and are not open to this wonderful liberal background that most of us, I think, in this room share?
Well, okay. I'm not sure, like, there was a lot of interest in that question. One of the things that's really important for me to say in locations like this is that my vision for America includes people who disagree with me radically. I am not trying to get everyone to be me. That would be horrible. And I recognize, as you've heard, like, I have a husband, I have children. There are going to be people who disagree with me completely. And that is okay. And that doesn't mean that I don't get to exist. And it also doesn't mean that they don't get to exist. And I want them to have churches where they feel comfortable, and I want them to have families where they can fully embrace the worldview that they have. And I also want them to feel like they can live alongside me in a community where we can actually interact. We might be at a cafe with one another. We might be polite with one another. We can be with one another, and we can be at a soup kitchen with one another. There's so much we can do with one another without imposing one thing on everyone. And I want my kids go to a public school in New York City. It's a very diverse school with people from all different religious backgrounds and all different economic backgrounds and all different, this is we are in a really interesting neighborhood. And I'm so glad that not everyone is like my kids there. But I also want my kids to feel respected. And I want to feel respected alongside everyone else. And so I think it's important for us to have a vision that includes everyone and recognizes the right of everyone. But underneath that recognizes that in the Constitution, as I understand it, and as I think it was intended, that no one gets to decide for everyone else what that looks like. And that is, that's frankly how I understand the promise of America, however faulty we have lived into it. And so whenever I talk at anything, I always try to emphasize this message, that my vision for the future includes very, very conservative people who disagree with me completely, but that underneath it all is a society where we can all feel respected and are a lot of that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, again, I'm not trying to convince everyone of my worth but I am trying to convince the majority of Americans that it is really important to get active and to preserve our country where we can all coexist. And I think that's the reason Interfaith Alliance and my work is really geared towards that, a deep understanding of the nature of the promise of the project of America, and that we use Achieving Democracy Together, which is a nod towards Baldwin, who wrote about achieving our country and what that will look like. And that is that it feels to me like it is my calling, and it's I think hopefully a calling for the majority of Americans.
Today, as we get information from the internet, we're constantly having to evaluate facts. Are they true or are they false? Do libraries have a mission that they need to make sure that what they present are true facts? And at what point, what line do we cross and it becomes censorship?
Thank you so much for that question. I think, the question of truth and facts may not be one way to think of that is to not think of those as the same things, but think of truth as a principle, as an ideal that we believe in, and that, for instance, a religious truth, that I can hold that religious truth as true, but it doesn't have to be true for everyone else. Facts are different, one of the most startling and kind of brilliant phrases in the first Trump administration was when Kellyanne Conway said, we have alternative facts. And I found that really a shocking and brilliant thing to say, disturbing. And I think we see that. This may not be helpful, but I do actually. So I went to seminary in the 90s, just as the internet was becoming really publicly available, and I not immediately, but I began to see what was both the possibilities, but also the terrible disaster that the internet would be. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do is insist that facts are real. Continue to hold on to that idea. But help, especially help young people, but actually old people old people like me, understand how to discern that, especially in this moment of deep fakes. I mean, really, someone could take a video of me talking about this, and you could just have me saying anything you want, and it would be almost impossible for most people to tell. And so this is real, and figuring out that my hope is that libraries are taking seriously that training that we all need to figure out fact from misinformation or disinformation. And disinformation is out there, people intentionally trying to mislead people. Misinformation is often things that are misinterpreted and more benign in intent, but equally devastating in the way it comes across. And I think that the fight over facts can get political, but we can't give up on facts. In fact, that was one of the biggest, important Louis Brandeis in his work, and one of his contributions to jurisprudence. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, Nate, but something called the Brandeis Brief, which was the first time that facts were introduced into the Supreme Court, talking about talking about why a law should be upheld or not. Really, he would talk about the facts that surround a case, that the law was not hanging out there without facts that made a difference in how to decide cases. And so I think it's really important, but there's ways that this disinformation campaigns that are out there can be lethal for communities that it's being used against. And so I'm not sure that that's a satisfying answer for you, but I do think I appreciate you bringing it up, and it's one of the most difficult challenges we have, not just in America, but around the world.
I have a question, Chris. You, in my discovering over the past 14, 15 months, all the enormous insight that your life and your intellect and your training has afforded you, I came across your interview of Jimmy Carter, I mentioned earlier, in 2012, and the relevance of that to me, I think, is in this space, is that one of the things you drew out of President Carter, you went to plans the interview when it comes out of your reporting, is his unabashed assertion of his deep faith, and yet in bringing that to his public life, and the positions he would reflect in his public life, he was able to draw the line away from using that as a cudgel or saying, you must adopt my same views from Plains, Georgia, the Baptist Church, Maranatha Baptist Church. I think part of the problem is that people who want to do what you're saying and suggesting is to bring their religion into the chaos between those who would censor books and those of us who believe ardently in having everybody's story told in the library, is they feel some limitation on how much can I talk about my faith that drives me to support this notion of intellectual freedom and democracy and everybody's still being told, before I go over that line that I'm critical of people using against books, against stories, against subcultures, against marginalized people in the society. Carter seems to have gotten that for his nearly 100 years pretty close to perfect pitch, as I can tell. What do you think about that? How do people who have some sense of their faith being a part of who they are in the public arena or in the public discussion not go over that line that we're all concerned about, where religion becomes a tool to bludgeon other people into believing the same thing I do?
Yeah, it's a great question. A great moment that I'll never forget is attending President Carter's memorial service at the National Cathedral. I was able to witness that up close and personal, and to see the wide variety of people in that congregation. And just as a tangent, the incredible, I don't know how many people saw it or watched it, but the incredible way that the Ford family and the Carter family had actually shown up for one another, how those two men who had been bitter rivals found a way to find a friendship, and then how their sons read Gerald Ford's son read the eulogy that his father had written for Jimmy Carter. It was incredibly moving, and the religious range of people who were participated in that service. Yeah, I think Jimmy Carter got that very close to being perfect as far as the way to understand how religion can function in American life, which is, especially in American government, in that he was, I think you could argue, one of the most pious pious presidents we've had, and like authentically Christian. And having talked to, I interviewed him 3 times, and each time I came away saying, "Woof, this guy is serious." Serious in his faith. One of my first questions to him is said, "I hope you don't mind, but is it okay to call you a Sunday school teacher?" And he said, "Oh, that's a major identity I have. I really, I've been doing that since I was young, and I do it still today. And I've done it all the way through." So this was a part of who he was. And yet when he went to the White House, he chose not to invite Billy Graham, who was a close friend of his and a pastor who was probably the most influential on him, to the White House, because he didn't want to be seen as endorsing one religion as the religion for his administration. He was very, very careful. He said, all of us come out of our faith traditions, and we can bring that into the public square, but there is a way that we can take that step too far so that it feels like we are endorsing one religious tradition over another, and insisting that one religious tradition is has more value or worth than another tradition. And I think that's exactly right. I fully expect politicians to have a religious tradition, and fully expect that to inspire them. And having been able to interview many faith leaders let me put it this way: political leaders who are faithful people. I think they are thinking about that, and there is a difference between trying to bring your values and your moral principles to your work, without saying that everyone must adhere to my religious tradition, or that should be understood as a state religion. And I think President Carter did that perfectly, and we should applaud him for that, because he was someone who, going back to the Baptist idea of separation of church and state, that was a really important principle for Jimmy Carter, who was deeply steeped in that Baptist principle
Do you know how seldom I get to say I'm proud to be a Baptist? And I am beaming right now. We're talking about the best of the Baptist tradition.
Yeah, and he really, he really walked that walk all the way through his life. And he was really thoughtful, and he told me like every night, he and Rosalind would read a passage together, and they would think about it together. And so this is a deeply religious man who also who believed in Christianity. He believed in the test. He believed that Jesus Christ was his Lord and Savior, and that did not mean that everybody else had to be Christian. And I think that's what will make America live into its principles. The opportunity for everyone to have that ability to make those decisions for themselves.
Yeah. And I would add this. One of Jimmy Carter's good friends was James Dunn, who ran the Baptist Joint Committee, which is one of our church's partners. They are a church-state religious liberty education and lobbyist group in Washington, D.C. James Dunn was a crotchety old man who told it like he was. And one day he said, "Your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. And I will protect your right to swing your fist, but I will also protect everyone else's noses too." And I think that's the line here, right? Like, we want to foster a community where people can swing their fist. There's probably a better analogy than that. But your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. And part of our work is to name that boundary, right? You've talked a bit about, especially last night at Second, the difference between, well, I'll just say it this way, the faith of Jesus, the Christian faith, and Christian nationalism. And it goes back to really all the questions tonight. It feels to me like the Christian faith is when we're trying to practice the way of Jesus. And Christian nationalism is when the Christian faith is being used for political purposes. And the difference is in discerning those two. Can you speak just for a minute about how you differentiate between genuine, authentic Christian faith and blatant Christian nationalism, which is on the rise in this country?
Yeah, I probably would phrase it slightly differently, because I think it's very tempting to say, well, those Christians are the bad Christians, and I'm part of the good Christians. And actually, I think Christianity has, we have to kind of, I don't want to distance myself from the way Christianity has been exercised. I think what right now, understanding Christian nationalism as it's a description, it's a description of a political movement rather than a religious movement. And I think that's the way I try to explain it. It's like it is a quest for power, using that has been with us forever in this country. It is a using of religion, and right now it uses phrases like "we are a Christian nation." What do you mean by that? Like, that means that some people have privileged positions in this country. The Christian folks have privileged position in this country, and then when you go deeper, it's like, what do you really mean by that? And then it tends to then the kind of white supremacy comes out, and then the kind of anti-women's rights comes out, and anti-LGBT. And so I think that, to be clear, it is, we're in a moment where some people feel very threatened by the diversity that, in my opinion, makes America amazing and gives America life. And we see that in, like, you can't, in many places, you can't even say diversity anymore, much less equity or inclusion. Those three words are actually censored.
Yeah.
I mean, the people are now being told they can't say those words in certain settings. That is crazy to me. And so I think we have to put the Christian nationalist question in the context of a broader question about an effort, rooted in, I think, racism of an idea that America is a place where Christians, and especially white Christians, have a privileged place in our society. And it's being put forth by people who are, again, often using anti-Semitic tropes about like the Great Replacement theory. I'm not sure if that's familiar to you, about how the Jews are bringing in all these foreigners to dilute Christian power. I mean, it goes into so many areas, but what ultimately is about is like this nostalgic for a time when, white Christians were able to rule the roost, and now all these other folks are trying to get, are trying to have a piece of what was ours. And they really view America that way, as opposed to an expanding idea of who matters in America, which is actually what, the greatest movement that we've had over the past, 150 years, including more and more people in the who matters, who counts in America. And there is, this, I think what we're seeing is people saying like, well, that means that I'm not included, or that devalues me. And the metaphor I try to use, it doesn't devalue you. It just means that you're part of a whole, rather than insisting on being the center and the only thing that matters here. And again, I go back to the idea, I want this broad community everyone to feel welcome. Mm-hmm. To cast this vision of America that is really inclusive of everyone. It does not have to be a zero-sum game for our country. Mm-hmm. The advancement of other people is not the diminishment of others. It is just more people feeling a part of things, a part of our country, a part of our democracy, achieving democracy together. And so that, I think, is the hope for our future. And that is a vision that even in this terribly difficult time, where it can lead to cynicism and despair, continuing to hold on to a vision of America where all are welcome, all are included, all are celebrated. That's going to take us to where we need to go. And I am convinced if we can keep that in front of people and cast that vision as powerfully as possible, we will get through this moment and we'll come out the other side.
Let's end there, yeah. I like to end on hope. I believe Paul will be in the lobby. Is that right? Paul will not be in the lobby. No book signing tonight. No books to sign. Paul will be resting.
I don't believe in books.
He's banned all the books.
My books have been banned. I don't know why Nate banned all my books. No, I didn't bring any books.
But will you join me and thank Paul for his presence and his wisdom and his witness with us? And thanks so much for your time tonight. Peace be with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Brilliant. Yeah. Very good.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Somebody said something about a book signing.
I don't have any books.
Okay.